they knew I was going to be the speaker. So, remember that my last presentation, I graduated from high school, West Side High School, January of 1939. Remember, I left on a high because I starred in a musical, and it gave me a lot of self-confidence, and I went out into the work world full of confidence that I was going to change things. Now, the years between high school and going into the Navy, I worked at Edison's in West Orange. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about Edison and about the factory there. However, I want to tell you how I got to be at Edison's. My father and mother were born in New York City of German immigrants. He worked for a motor company, a manufacturer of motors called Crocker and Wheeler. Now, Crocker and Wheeler moved to New Jersey, and my father came with them. He was known as a hand armature winder. And you people that know motors know that the motor has a field and a rotor, shaft, bearings, and so forth. So there's windings in there, and the amount of turns and the diameter of the wire determines the horsepower and speed of the motor. Well, my father was an expert, and eventually he read of an ad that Edison was looking for a hand armature winder. So he went to work in Edison. Now, throughout my youth, I heard a lot about Edison. So I'll tell you a little bit about Edison, the man. You all know him as a fabulous inventor, which he was. And a lot of you people don't appreciate the fact that we had this great man in our own neighborhood. Now, we had a laboratory down in Menlo Park where he developed the incandescent bulb, and a lot of you might notice down there, the town was named after him, Edison, New Jersey, and there's a big bulb there as a monument to him. Now, early on, he bought property in Llewellyn Park, several acres, and he built a nice house for himself there. He had two sons. Now, early on, his first wife died, and he remarried later on, and he became active in the social fabric of Llewellyn Park when he could, because he would often leave to go back to the lab to pursue his interests. He had a very fertile mind and just a fabulous inventor. Now, when you look at the factory from Main Street and you stand in front of it, to the left was a building of the lab. It was a 3-story building called the Splittorf. Dead ahead was the Edison building, and to the right was a 5-story building called the Battery Division. Now, Edison and Essel Ford and Firestone were great, great buddies, and they helped each other. The Splittorf division made spark plugs, the ignition wires, the points, and the little cap that goes over the points. the distributor cap, and they also made the coil that provided, it was like a little upscale voltage thing that made a high voltage go into the spark plugs. Now, the Edison spark plugs were very well known. They were used in the Ford cars, and they were sold in auto stores. So that was a big seller. The Edison battery was very well known. It was used in the Ford cars too. Now, sometime the government called Edison and asked him in his battery division, could he make batteries for the submarines? Because sonar would pick up the engine noise, and the surface aircraft could tell there was a submarine underneath. So Edison perfected the battery that went into the U.S. submarine. Now, Charles went into politics. He didn't have a lot of charisma, and he wasn't necessarily the best speaker in the world. But he was elected governor and did a fairly good job. The other son was not mechanical at all. He wasn't interested in the business at all. And he went to Michigan, and he started a firm making nursery products. And when I had my first child, maybe it was out of loyalty, but I bought an Edison crib, an Edison bureau, an Edison little chair, and a little rocking chair. They were made out of solid, light maple, very well made, extraordinarily well made, but they were expensive. He eventually, when he got older, the product phased out and just died. The family itself were not exceptionally good salesmen for their products. And I went there and I became an inspector. That was my job. My father was very well known, Marty Klein, and when I went there, he was known as Pop Klein. Now, the factory was very old-fashioned. It was a dismal place to work. When you went to work there, that was where you were going to be. You never moved. And in different parts of the factory, there was, like in a punch press, there was Polish men and uneducated. And where I moved from floor to floor, activity to activity, as an inspector. And I think a lot of my promotions were part me and part the fact that I was Pop Klein's son. However, I ended up in final inspection, and that's where I was when the war started. They managed to get a contract to make bolts and nuts and screws, but it was a small contract. They had no lobby in Washington. So they finally got this contract to get gears to go in naval aircraft under gun turrets. And I was assigned to check these gears. And along came this commander, Navy commander. He sat beside me, and we made sets. They were called worm gears because they were hand cut on a bias. And we had a little machine, we matched gears, and as it turned, if there was any little burr or any little mechanical maladjustment, you would see a wiggle in there, and they were rejected. Now, we made sets of those gears, and we put them together because they had to mesh perfectly. So that was my job, and I had a deferment for a little while, and also because my parents were aged and were ill. And I told the commander eventually that I just felt so guilty that my friends were all going, so he advised me to go down and try to get in the Navy, which I did. Now, in my travels, Edison had a nice home and a laboratory in Fort Myers, Florida. And, you know, he was, at one time, the Edison company made this Victrola, and it was a wind-up Victrola and a very nice cabinet. And they had a big speaker, big horn speaker. And in his lab in Fort Myers, he had this tremendous assortment of these Victrolas. And also, Firestone and Henry Ford, they wintered in Fort Myers, so the big three would be together. So he developed a lot of things. He developed the train signal system, like crossings and that. A lot of people didn't know that. And so I said he was great. Edsel Ford, the senior Ford, gave Edison, I think maybe the third Model T that came off the production line. The big three were very good friends, so they helped each other. And as Firestone was looking for synthetic rubber in South America and so forth, a lot of Edison's chemists helped develop the synthetic rubber. Now, I worked on the Ediphone, and that was a machine that the supervisor dictated into it, and it was a machine with a stylus, a diamond stylus, that went into this cylinder and produced dots and dashes, and a voice was recorded. Now, the secretary would take it, put the earphones on, and type. This was called the Ediphone. But there was a competitor that copied the Ediphone called the Dictaphone Company, almost identical. The patents had run out, and this company copied the Ediphone and sold it a little cheaper. And as time went on, the Ediphone was starting to lose sales.